A maid's daughter told Vampire King, "Sir, my mom has a mark just like yours. What happened next?" Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The Grand Hall of Blackthorn Citadel had not fallen this silent in more than 300 years. Hundreds of candles burned along towering stone walls, their golden light reflecting across polished obsidian floors. Vampire nobles stood in quiet clusters beneath vaulted ceilings, their voices soft, their movements graceful and controlled. At the far end of the hall rose the throne platform, carved from a single slab of dark marble. Upon that throne sat the ruler of them all, Vampire King Adrian Vale. His presence filled the chamber like winter itself. He appeared no older than a man in his early 30s, yet every creature inside that hall knew he had walked the earth for more than 6 centuries. His pale skin carried the stillness of ancient stone. His silver-gray eyes held the calm authority of someone who had witnessed empires rise and collapse into dust. On his right wrist rested a mark few living beings had ever seen. A deep crimson symbol shaped like a crown flame, etched into his skin as if the blood beneath it still burned. The sovereign blood mark, the ancient sign of the royal vampire line. Music drifted through the hall from a small orchestra positioned near the balcony, though even the musicians seemed hesitant tonight. Something in the air felt different, heavy, expectant. Adrian Vale listened as his court discussed trade alliances, territory disputes, and rumors of hunters moving across the northern mountains. The conversations meant little to him. He had heard variations of the same problems for centuries. Yet just as he lifted a crystal goblet filled with dark red wine, something unusual happened near the edge of the hall. A small voice, soft, human. "Excuse me, sir." Several vampire heads turned immediately. Humans were rarely permitted this close to the throne platform. Adrian lowered the goblet slowly and looked toward the voice. Standing near the base of the steps was a little girl no older than 7 years old. She wore a simple cotton dress that looked far too plain for a place like this. Her dark brown hair had been tied into 2 uneven braids. Her small shoes were dusty, as though she had walked a long way through the stone corridors of the citadel. A maid rushed forward behind her, panic written across her face. "Your Majesty, I am so sorry. She should not be here. I will take her away immediately." But the child did not move. She stared up at the throne with wide, determined eyes. Adrian raised one pale hand, and the entire hall froze. "Let her speak." His voice was calm, yet it carried through the chamber with quiet authority. The maid stopped instantly, trembling. The little girl stepped forward until she stood only a few feet from the bottom stair of the throne. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying the king. Then she pointed toward his wrist. "Sir," the child said with innocent certainty, "my mom has a mark just like yours." The goblet slipped from Adrian Vale's hand and shattered against the black marble floor. The sound of shattering crystal echoed across the grand hall as the goblet struck the black marble floor. Dark red wine spread across the stone like spilled blood, reflecting the trembling candlelight above. No one moved. Hundreds of vampires stood frozen in absolute silence. Every pair of eyes shifted between the ancient king on the throne and the small human child standing at the bottom of the stairs. Adrian Vale did not breathe for a moment. His silver-gray eyes remained fixed on the little girl as if the entire world had narrowed to that single fragile figure. The child looked back without fear. She seemed too young to understand the weight of the words she had just spoken. Behind her, the maid who had rushed forward dropped to her knees so quickly that her palms struck the floor with a sharp sound. "Your Majesty, please forgive her. She is only a child. She did not mean any disrespect. Please allow me to take her away." Her voice shook with panic. Several vampire nobles whispered among themselves, their voices thin and tense. A human child speaking to the king without permission was already shocking. But the words she had spoken were something else entirely. The mark. The sovereign blood mark was not simply a symbol. It was the most guarded sign of vampire royalty, older than most kingdoms that had ever existed on the human continent. No human was supposed to even know it existed. Adrian Vale slowly rose from the throne. The motion alone caused a ripple of unease across the hall. When the king stood, the entire room felt smaller. His long dark coat fell around him like a shadow as he stepped down from the throne platform. Each footstep echoed across the marble floor. One step, then another. No guard dared to interfere. The little girl watched him approach with open curiosity, her small hands clasped together in front of her dress. When Adrian stopped only a few feet away, the difference between them was striking. He towered above her like a figure carved from night itself, ancient and powerful. Yet his voice when he spoke was quiet. "What is your name, child?" The girl blinked once, then answered with simple honesty. "My name is Lily Carter, sir." Adrian lowered his gaze slightly. Carter. The name meant nothing to the vampire court, but something about the child voice carried a strange certainty that unsettled him. He looked toward the maid still kneeling behind her. "Stand up." The woman hesitated before rising slowly. Her face had gone pale with fear. She could not have been older than her late 20s. Her uniform was simple black cloth worn by the human servants of the citadel. Strands of brown hair had escaped from a loose braid, and exhaustion lined the corners of her eyes as if life had not been easy for her. "What is your name?" Adrian asked without raising his voice. "Emily Carter, your majesty." She answered quietly. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. "I am one of the night, maids assigned to the west corridor. I apologize for my daughter's behavior. She did not understand where she was going." The king studied her face for several long seconds. Something about her presence stirred an unfamiliar sensation in his mind, something distant and half-remembered, like a forgotten dream from centuries ago. Then Lily spoke again, her voice gentle but certain. "I was telling the truth, sir. My mom really has the same mark." Emily's face drained of color instantly. Lily stopped, but the child continued, pointing toward the sleeve of her mother uniform. "It shows sometimes when she gets sick. It glows a little bit like yours." A low murmur spread through the vampire nobles. Several stepped forward with narrowed eyes, studying the human woman as if she had suddenly become something dangerous. Adrian felt a slow tightening in his chest, something he had not experienced in more than 200 years. Impossible. And yet the child voice carried no deception. Lily Carter believed every word she had spoken. Adrian's gaze dropped toward Emily Carter's wrist where the black fabric sleeve covered her skin. A quiet command left his lips. "Show me your wrist." Emily Carter did not move. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath as the human maid stood frozen beneath the gaze of the oldest vampire king alive. Emily Carter stood motionless in the center of the great hall while hundreds of immortal eyes focused on her wrist. The silence grew so deep that even the small flames of the candles seemed to flicker more quietly. The command of the king still hung in the air like a blade. "Show me your wrist." Emily felt her heart beating hard against her ribs. She had worked inside Blackthorn Citadel for nearly 3 years, always invisible, always careful to keep her head down and her voice quiet. Humans who serve vampires survive by not drawing attention. Tonight that rule had shattered in front of the entire court. Lily moved closer to her mother and gently took her hand. "It is okay, Mom," the little girl whispered softly. "The king just wants to see it." Emily swallowed slowly. She looked up at Adrian Vale, and for the first time their eyes truly met. His silver-gray gaze was not angry. It was searching, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle that had waited centuries for its final piece. Around them several vampire nobles began whispering again. One tall noble with long white hair stepped forward slightly. "Your Majesty," he said with careful politeness, "surely this is unnecessary. Humans are known for deception and superstition. It would be wise to remove the child and return this servant to the lower quarters before rumors begin spreading through the court." Adrian did not look at the noble. His attention remained fixed on Emily Carter. The command did not change. Show me. Your wrist. Emily closed her eyes for a brief second. She had hidden the mark her entire life. She did not understand where it came from or why it appeared only during moments of illness or strong emotion. When Lily had been born, she had prayed the strange symbol would never bring trouble to their lives. But children saw truths adults try to hide. Slowly, Emily lifted her right hand. Her fingers trembled as she pulled back the black sleeve of her uniform. Pale skin appeared beneath the cloth. At first, there was nothing unusual to see. Several nobles exhaled with quiet annoyance, as if the moment had been a waste of the court time. Then it happened. A faint warmth spread across Emily's wrist like the slow glow of embers beneath ash. The skin shimmered. Lines of deep crimson light began to surface beneath the surface of her skin. The pattern unfolded like a hidden flame, awakening after centuries of sleep. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The symbol was unmistakable. A crown flame identical to the mark burned into the wrist of the vampire king himself. For a long moment, no one spoke. Adrian Vale stared at the mark as if time itself had stopped. His own wrist suddenly grew warm. The ancient symbol on his skin pulsed with a faint crimson light in answer to the one appearing on Emily Carter. Across the hall, several vampires stepped backward in visible shock. "This cannot be real," one noble whispered. Another voice spoke with quiet fear. "That is the sovereign blood mark. It cannot exist on human flesh." Lily looked up at the glowing symbol with innocent wonder. "See, Mom, I told you it looks just like the king mark." Emily lowered her gaze quickly, trying to hide her wrist again, but the glow had already spread too brightly. The crimson light reflected across the polished marble floor like a signal calling something ancient back into the world. Adrian finally moved. Slowly he extended his hand forward, revealing the identical mark on his own wrist. The two symbols glowed brighter as the distance between them closed. Every vampire in the hall could feel the shift in the air. Ancient magic older than the citadel walls stirred quietly like something awakening from a deep forgotten sleep. Adrian's voice, when he spoke, was lower than before, filled with disbelief that he could not hide. "Where did you get that mark, Emily Carter?" The human maid looked up with fear and confusion in her eyes. "I do not know, Your Majesty. I was born with it." The entire vampire court erupted into shocked murmurs as a truth no one had imagined began to take shape before their eyes. The crimson light from the two marks spread across the throne hall like a silent storm. Every vampire in the chamber could feel it. Ancient magic did not awaken often, and when it did, the air itself seemed to grow heavier. Emily Carter stood frozen with her sleeve pulled back while the glowing symbol on her wrist pulsed slowly like a second heartbeat. The light reflected in the wide eyes of her daughter Lily, who still held her hand with innocent trust. Around them, the vampire nobles stepped backward, their composure cracking for the first time in centuries. Several guards near the pillars instinctively placed their hands on the hilts of their swords, even though no command had been given. One voice rose above the whispers. "Impossible." The speaker was Lord Victor Halbrook, one of the oldest nobles of the northern houses. His sharp silver eyes burned with suspicion as he stared at the glowing mark. "That symbol belongs only to the bloodline of the king. It cannot appear on human flesh. It is forbidden by every ancient law of our kind." A wave of murmured agreement spread across the court. Another noble stepped forward beside him, her voice cold and controlled. "Your Majesty, this human woman must have stolen that mark through dark magic or forbidden ritual. Humans have always been capable of desperate tricks when they seek power they do not deserve." Lily looked up at the nobles with confusion. "My mom did not steal anything," she said quietly. "She has always had it." Emily squeezed her daughter's hand gently. "It is all right, Lily," she whispered. Adrian Vale did not move. His gaze remained fixed on the glowing symbol, as if every memory from 6 centuries of life was searching for an answer inside it. The warmth on his own wrist had grown stronger. The sovereign blood mark on his skin burned with a deep crimson glow that matched Emily Carter's mark exactly. He had carried that symbol since the night he ascended the throne more than 600 years ago. No other vampire had ever carried the same mark. Not even the ancient queens who ruled beside kings in the forgotten centuries of vampire history. The symbol was supposed to appear only once in a generation, yet now it existed twice. Adrian took one slow step forward. The entire court went silent again. When he stopped in front of Emily Carter, the glow between their wrists intensified, casting faint red reflections across the marble floor. The connection between the two marks was undeniable. Ancient magic recognized ancient magic. Emily looked up at him with uncertainty. "I do not understand what this means, Your Majesty. I swear I have never practiced magic. I have never even seen anything like this before." Adrian studied her expression carefully. Fear was there. Confusion was there. But there was no deception. His voice remained calm, though the weight of the moment pressed heavily through the hall. "Who are your parents, Emily Carter?" Emily hesitated for a moment before answering. "My mother's name was Sarah Carter. She worked as a nurse in a small town 2 hours north of here. She raised me alone. She passed away when I was 16 years old." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. "And your father?" Emily lowered her gaze. "I never knew him. My mother said he disappeared before I was born." Lord Holbrook stepped forward again, his patience clearly gone. "Your Majesty, this is becoming dangerous. A human claiming ignorance does not change the fact that she carries the royal mark. If word spreads beyond these walls, the entire vampire world will question the purity of the throne." Several nobles nodded in agreement. The presence of the mark on human skin threatened centuries of tradition and power. But Adrian raised one hand, and the room fell silent once more. His silver-gray eyes returned to the glowing symbol on Emily's wrist. Something in his memory stirred like a distant echo from another century. A fragment of an old prophecy whispered long ago inside the hidden chambers of the royal archives. When the lost flame returns in unexpected blood, the throne will face a truth buried beneath time itself. Adrian did not speak those words aloud. Instead, he slowly extended his own wrist closer to Emily Carter mark. The moment the two symbols moved within inches of each other, the crimson light surged brighter. A pulse of ancient energy rippled through the hall, strong enough that every vampire present felt it pass through their veins. Several gasped quietly as the truth became impossible to deny. The sovereign blood mark was responding to her. Adrian's voice broke the stunned silence with quiet authority. "Guards, clear the hall. No one leaves the citadel tonight." The heavy doors of Blackthorn Citadel thundered shut as the last vampire noble was forced to leave the grand hall. Guards in dark armor moved quickly across the marble floor, sealing every entrance and corridor. Outside the massive chamber, the whispers of the court continued like a restless storm trapped behind stone walls. Inside the hall, only a few figures remained. Vampire King Adrian Vale stood near the throne platform. Emily Carter and her daughter Lily stood several feet away beneath the flickering candlelight. The crimson glow from the two sovereign blood marks had begun to fade slightly, yet the warmth in the air had not disappeared. Ancient magic still lingered, like an invisible presence watching the room. Two royal guards positioned themselves near the pillars while the king's closest advisor stepped forward from the shadows. His name was Marcus Thorne. Unlike most vampires in the court, Marcus carried an expression of calm, discipline shaped by centuries of service. His dark coat moved softly as he approached the throne steps and lowered his head in respect. "The hall is secured, Your Majesty. No one will enter or leave the citadel until you give the order." Adrian gave a quiet nod without looking away from Emily Carter. "Good." The king's voice carried the steady authority that had ruled vampire territories for 6 centuries. "This conversation will remain within these walls until the truth is known." Emily felt Lily's hand tighten around her fingers. "Mom, are we in trouble?" the child asked softly. Emily bent slightly and brushed a loose strand of hair from her daughter's face. "No, sweetheart," she whispered gently. "Everything is going to be fine." Yet even as she said the words, her heart continued to pound with fear. She had worked among vampires long enough to understand one truth. Nothing involving ancient vampire magic was ever simple. Marcus Thorne studied the glowing mark on Emily's wrist with careful attention. "Your Majesty, may I examine the symbol more closely? Adrian stepped aside slightly. Marcus moved closer to Emily, but kept a respectful distance so the human woman would not feel threatened. The crimson lines of the mark were still faintly visible on her pale skin. Marcus narrowed his eyes as he observed the shape, the crown above the flame, the three branching lines beneath it, the ancient royal crest exactly as recorded in the oldest vampire archives. Marcus spoke slowly as if measuring each word carefully. Your Majesty, the mark is genuine. There is no sign of illusion or spell work. The magic responding between the two symbols is ancient blood magic. It cannot be forged by human ritual. Emily looked between the two vampires with growing confusion. I do not understand any of this, she said quietly. I have never practiced magic. I clean hallways and prepare guest rooms. That is my entire life. Lily tugged gently on her mother's sleeve. Mom, maybe the mark means you are special. The innocent comment echoed softly through the hall. Marcus Thorne turned his gaze toward the child with quiet curiosity. Sometimes children see truths adults overlook. Adrian Vale slowly walked toward a tall window overlooking the dark forest outside the citadel. Night stretched across the mountains like an endless sea of shadow. For a long moment the king said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before, but filled with deep thought. Marcus, how many recorded cases exist in our history where the sovereign blood mark appeared on more than one individual? Marcus did not hesitate. None, Your Majesty. The symbol appears once in a generation and only within the royal vampire bloodline. It has never appeared on human flesh. The king remained still at the window. Then explain this. Marcus Thorne answered carefully. There are only two possibilities, Your Majesty. Either the ancient laws of blood magic have changed, or the woman standing behind us carries a bloodline connected to the royal house itself. Emily Carter felt the world tilt beneath her feet. That cannot be true. My family has always been human. My mother was a nurse in a small-town hospital. She never spoke of vampires or royal bloodlines. Adrian turned slowly from the window. The faint crimson light from the mark on his wrist had returned once again. Ancient magic does not lie, Emily Carter. Somewhere in your past, there is a truth that even you do not know yet. The words of Marcus Thorne lingered in the quiet hall like the echo of something ancient that refused to remain buried. Somewhere in your past, there is a truth that even you do not know yet. Emily Carter felt the air grow colder around her as those words settled into her mind. She had spent her entire life believing she understood who she was. A daughter of a hardworking nurse. A single mother trying to give her child a better future. A maid who quietly cleaned corridors and guest chambers in a fortress filled with creatures far more powerful than herself. Now the ground beneath that simple identity seemed to crumble piece by piece. Lily tugged gently at her hand again and looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. Mom, are we really connected to the king? Emily forced a small smile, even though uncertainty filled her chest. I do not know, sweetheart, but we will figure out together. Across the hall, Adrian Vale remained still for several moments. The faint crimson glow of the sovereign blood mark had returned to his wrist once again. This time the warmth spreading through his veins felt stronger. The ancient symbol pulsed slowly like a quiet signal responding to something deep inside Emily Carter blood. Marcus Thorne observed the phenomenon with careful attention. Your Majesty, the reaction between the marks is increasing. That level of resonance usually occurs only between individuals who share blood magic of the same origin. Adrian turned his gaze toward Emily again. For 6 centuries he had ruled with control and certainty. Tonight something far older than his authority had entered the room and refused to obey the normal laws of the vampire world. Emily Carter, he said calmly, tell me about your mother. Emily blinked slightly at the unexpected question. My mother's name was Sarah Carter. She raised me alone in a small town called Pine Hollow. It is about 90 miles north of the Citadel. She worked long shifts at the hospital and always told me to focus on school and stay away from trouble. She paused for a moment while memories surfaced that she had not thought about in years. There was one strange thing, though. Adrian leaned slightly forward. Continue. When I was a child, I asked her about the mark on my wrist. She never gave a clear answer. She only said it was a birthmark that had been in our family for generations. She told me never to show it to anyone, especially not to strangers. Marcus Thorne narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. Did she ever explain why? Emily shook her head slowly. She only said that some secrets were meant to stay hidden until the right time. Adrian's expression changed slightly at those words. The right time. The phrase triggered a distant memory buried in the oldest records of the royal house. A prophecy whispered among the ancient queens before the rise of the modern vampire courts. When the hidden flame reveals itself again, the bloodline of the throne will face its forgotten branch. Adrian turned toward Marcus. Bring the royal archive records. I want every document connected to the sovereign blood mark. Marcus nodded once. It will take a few minutes, Your Majesty. The archive chamber is 3 floors below the West Tower. As Marcus moved toward the exit, Lily looked around the enormous hall with growing curiosity. Her small voice broke the heavy silence again. Sir King Vale, can I ask you something? Adrian looked down at her with a faint trace of surprise. Very few people in the world spoke to him with such fearless innocence. You may ask, child. Lily tilted her head slightly. If my mom really has the same mark as you, does that mean we are family? For the first time that night, Adrian Vale did not immediately answer. The question was simple, but the truth behind it could change the entire foundation of the vampire world. The king gaze shifted from the glowing mark on Emily's wrist to the child standing beside her. The ancient magic between their bloodlines continued to pulse quietly in the air, as if waiting for a truth that had been hidden for centuries to finally be revealed. Adrian Vale did not answer Lily's question immediately. The child's voice had been simple and innocent, yet it carried a possibility that no ruler of the vampire world had ever faced before. Family. The word lingered in the silent hall like the distant toll of a bell. The ancient king slowly stepped closer to Emily Carter and her daughter. The faint crimson light of the sovereign blood mark on his wrist continued to pulse in quiet rhythm with the mark on Emily's skin. For centuries, that symbol had represented absolute authority within the vampire world. It marked the bloodline that ruled every vampire house across continents and generations. Yet now that same symbol glowed on the wrist of a human woman who had spent her nights cleaning hallways inside his own citadel. Adrian finally spoke, his voice calm but thoughtful. The truth of that question is not simple, Lily Carter. Bloodlines that carry ancient magic do not always reveal their full story at once. Lily seemed to consider his answer seriously. Her young face showed none of the fear that had gripped many adults earlier that night. She simply nodded as if she accepted that some mysteries required patience. Emily stood quietly beside her daughter, her thoughts racing through memories of her childhood. There had been small, strange moments over the years that she had never fully understood. Times when a mark on her wrist had warmed unexpectedly. Times when her mother had reacted with sudden concern if anyone noticed the symbol beneath her sleeve. At the time, she had believed it was simply an unusual birthmark. Now those forgotten memories felt like pieces of a puzzle slowly shifting into place. The doors of the great hall opened again with a heavy echo. Marcus Thorne returned carrying a thick leather-bound volume wrapped carefully in dark cloth. Dust from centuries past still clung to the edges of the book as if it had rarely been removed from its resting place deep within the royal archives. Marcus approached the throne platform and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, this is the original record of the sovereign blood mark. It was written during the early years of the first vampire monarchy nearly 900 years ago. Adrian accepted the volume and slowly removed the cloth covering it. The ancient pages inside were written in a script older than the modern language spoken in the court today. Candlelight reflected across the faded ink as he turned the first few pages. The hall remained silent, except for the quiet sound of paper moving beneath his fingers. After a moment, Adrian stopped at a particular page. His silver-gray eyes narrowed slightly as he read the passage written there. Marcus stepped closer to read over the king's shoulder. The text described the origin of the sovereign blood mark and the ancient magic tied to the royal bloodline. But near the bottom of the page, another paragraph appeared written in a different hand, as if it had been added years after the original. Record. Marcus read the line slowly. When the royal flame divides, it does not disappear. The ancient blood may travel unseen through generations, hidden among human lives until the mark awakens again. The return of the hidden flame signals that the throne must face the truth of its forgotten branch. Emily felt a chill pass through her as Marcus finished reading the passage. Hidden among human lives. The words echoed through her mind like something both terrifying and impossible. Adrian closed the book slowly. For several long seconds, he said nothing. Then he lifted his gaze toward Emily Carter once again. It appears your mother may have been protecting a secret older than either of us realized. The crimson light of the two marks flickered once more across the stone floor, as if the ancient magic itself had been waiting for this moment of revelation. The ancient words written in the Royal Archive book seemed to settle over the great hall like a shadow from another century. Hidden among human lives. The return of the hidden flame. Emily Carter stood very still as those phrases echoed through her mind again and again. She had spent nearly 30 years believing her life was ordinary. Yet the record in the king's hands suggested that her entire existence might be part of a secret older than the citadel itself. Lily leaned gently against her mother's side and looked up at the massive throne hall with quiet fascination. Mom, does that mean Grandma knew about all this? Emily hesitated before answering. I think she must have known something, but she never explained it to me. Adrian Vale slowly closed the ancient book and placed it on the marble surface of the throne platform. The candlelight reflected across the faded leather cover, as if the past itself had just been opened and forced into the present. Marcus Thorne stood beside him, still studying the passage they had discovered. Your Majesty, if the record is correct, then the royal bloodline may have separated long ago and continued through a hidden human branch. Adrian folded his hands behind his back and began walking slowly across the hall. His long coat moved softly against the polished floor as he passed the tall pillars and flickering candles. The faint crimson glow of the sovereign blood mark remained visible on his wrist. That would mean the royal bloodline never truly disappeared when the old queen vanished 300 years ago. Marcus nodded once. The history books recorded that Queen Eleanor disappeared during the Northern War. Many believe she died while traveling through human territory, but her body was never found. Emily's heart skipped slightly at those words. Queen Eleanor. The name sounded distant and unfamiliar, yet something about it stirred a strange feeling in her chest. A faint echo of recognition that she could not explain. Adrian stopped walking and turned toward Emily again. Your mother, Sarah Carter. Did she ever mention any connection to an ancestor named Eleanor? Emily shook her head slowly. No, Your Majesty. She never spoke about our family history beyond my grandparents. But there was something she always told me when I was young. Adrian waited quietly. She said that if anyone ever asked about the mark on my wrist, I should tell them it was only a birthmark and nothing more. She told me that some truths could bring danger if the wrong people learned about them. Marcus Thorne crossed his arms thoughtfully. That warning would make sense if your mother understood that the mark represented a royal bloodline, revealing it could attract powerful enemies. Lily listened carefully to the conversation, even though much of it was far beyond her years. She suddenly looked up at Adrian again with innocent curiosity. Mr. King, if Emily Carter is part of the royal family, does that mean some vampires might not like it? Adrian's eyes shifted briefly toward the sealed doors of the hall. The child question carried more wisdom than she realized. Yes, Lily Carter, he answered calmly. Some members of the vampire court would see this as a threat to the order they have known for centuries. The presence of another royal bloodline could change the balance of power. Emily felt a chill pass down her spine. I never wanted any power, she said quietly. I only wanted a safe life for my daughter. Adrian studied her expression carefully. The fear in her voice was genuine. Yet the ancient magic glowing between their marks continued to pulse, as if reminding them that destiny rarely asks permission before changing someone's life. Marcus Thorne looked toward the sealed doors again. Your Majesty, the nobles will not remain silent for long. Once they begin to suspect that the royal bloodline has returned in human form, the entire court will demand answers. Adrian lifted his wrist slightly and watched the crimson mark glow beneath his skin. For 6 centuries, he had ruled the vampire world with certainty and strength. Tonight, a human woman and her young daughter had stepped into that world, carrying a secret powerful enough to reshape it. The king's voice was steady when he spoke again. Then we will give them the truth when the time comes. But first we must uncover the rest of the story your mother never told you, Emily Carter. The silence inside Blackthorn Citadel grew heavier after Adrian Vale's final words. The promise to uncover the hidden truth behind Emily Carter bloodline did not bring comfort. Instead, it stirred a deeper tension that seemed to seep through the ancient stones of the hall itself. Emily could feel it in the air. The Citadel was no longer calm. It was waiting. Adrian walked slowly back toward the throne platform, while Marcus Thorne remained beside the archive book. The king's mind moved quickly through centuries of memory and political consequence. The moment the vampire court learned that the sovereign blood mark had appeared on human flesh, the fragile balance between the noble houses would shatter. Some would see Emily Carter as a rightful heir to a forgotten royal branch. Others would see her existence as a threat that had to be erased before it spread chaos through the vampire world. Lily shifted beside her mother and whispered softly, "Mom, why do the big castle people look so serious when they talk about you?" Emily brushed her daughter's hair gently. "Because they're trying to understand something very old, sweetheart. Sometimes old secrets make powerful people nervous." Across the hall, Marcus Thorne closed the ancient archive book carefully. "Your Majesty, we must assume the nobles will demand a council meeting by morning. Lord Hallbrook and the northern houses will not accept silence for long." Adrian nodded slowly. "I expected as much." The king's eyes drifted briefly toward the sealed doors where the court had been forced to leave earlier. The vampire nobles were already spreading rumors through the corridors of the Citadel. Centuries of loyalty could easily collapse if the idea of a second royal bloodline gained enough attention. Emily spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, if my existence is causing this much danger, I can leave the Citadel. My daughter and I can return to Pine Hollow and forget any of this ever happened." The words were sincere. She had never wanted power or attention. She only wanted safety for Lily. Adrian's gaze shifted toward her again. For a moment, his expression softened slightly. "That will not be possible, Emily Carter. The mark on your wrist has already awakened. Ancient blood magic does not return quietly. Even if you left this citadel, the reaction between the marks would still be felt by every elder vampire across the continent within a few days." Marcus Thorne added quietly, "Your presence has already changed the board. Leaving now would only make you vulnerable." Lily looked up again, sensing the seriousness of the moment, even if she did not fully understand it. "Are bad people going to come after my mom?" Adrian answered her question without hesitation. "Anyone who wishes to harm your mother will have to face the king of this citadel first." The calm certainty in his voice filled the hall like steel. Emily felt a strange mixture of fear and relief at those words. Before she could respond, the heavy doors of the hall trembled slightly as someone pounded from the outside. A guard stepped quickly toward the entrance and opened it just enough to speak with the figure beyond. Moments later, the guard returned and bowed deeply before Adrian. "Your Majesty, Lord Victor Hallbrook and several nobles demand an immediate audience. They claim the court has the right to know why the hall was sealed." Marcus Thorne exhaled slowly. "It begins sooner than expected." Adrian stood perfectly still for several seconds. The crimson glow on his wrist flickered once again, as if the ancient magic itself was reacting to the rising tension within the citadel. Then the king spoke with quiet authority. "Bring them in. If the vampire court wishes to hear the truth, then they will hear it from me." As the great doors began to open again, Emily Carter felt the weight of hundreds of years of hidden history pressing toward her. The secret her mother had protected all those years was about to face the entire vampire world. The massive doors of Blackthorn's citadel opened slowly with a deep grinding sound that echoed through the throne hall like distant thunder. Cold night air slipped inside as the first of the vampire nobles stepped across the threshold. Lord Victor Hallbrook entered at the front, his tall figure wrapped in a dark silver coat that marked the authority of the northern houses. Behind him came nearly a dozen other nobles whose ancient bloodlines had ruled their territories for centuries. Their eyes immediately searched the hall until they found the human woman standing beside the throne platform. A quiet ripple of whispers moved through the group. Emily Carter felt Lily grip her hand tighter as the nobles entered. The child instinctively stepped slightly behind her mother while watching the powerful figures approach with cautious curiosity. Adrian Vale stood at the center of the hall waiting for them, his posture calm and unshaken. The crimson glow of the sovereign blood mark still flickered faintly on his wrist. Lord Hallbrook stopped several yards away and gave a shallow bow that carried respect but very little warmth. "Your Majesty, the court demands an explanation." The throne hall was sealed without warning, and rumors are already spreading throughout the citadel. Adrian's voice was steady. "Rumors have a habit of running ahead of the truth. That is why you are here now, to hear the truth directly." Hallbrook's eyes moved toward Emily Carter and the glowing symbol on her wrist. His expression hardened immediately. The moment he saw the mark, the air in the hall seemed to grow colder. That symbol belongs only to the royal bloodline. Yet it appears on the wrist of a human servant. Explain how such an abomination is possible. Lily frowned slightly at the word he used, but said nothing. Emily felt a quiet wave of anger rise inside her chest, but she remained silent. Adrian stepped forward one pace, and the nobles instantly fell quiet. "There will be no insults spoken in my hall, Lord Hallbrook. The human woman standing there is under my protection." The northern lord gave a thin smile that carried no humor. "Protection is one thing, Your Majesty, but the stability of the vampire world is another. If the sovereign blood mark has appeared on human flesh, it threatens the legitimacy of the throne itself." Several nobles behind him nodded in agreement. Marcus Thorne stepped beside Adrian and placed the ancient archive book on the marble platform where everyone could see it. "The explanation you demand begins here." He opened the book to the page discovered earlier and turned it so the nobles could read the ancient passage. Hallbrook leaned forward slightly while the others studied the faded writing under the candlelight. Their expressions slowly shifted from anger to confusion. One noble whispered quietly, "Hidden among human lives." Another voice spoke with disbelief, "A divided royal bloodline." Hallbrook straightened slowly. Ancient texts are not proof. Many old records contain legends and speculation. Adrian's gaze remained fixed on him. Perhaps, but the reaction of the sovereign blood mark is not legend. It is blood magic older than any house represented in this hall. To demonstrate his point, Adrian extended his wrist again. The crimson mark brightened immediately. Emily Carter mark answered the motion with its own rising glow. A faint pulse of energy moved through the chamber like a heartbeat echoing through stone walls. Several nobles stepped backward instinctively. "That reaction cannot be forged," Marcus said quietly. "Only shared royal blood can awaken the mark in such a way." Hallbrook's eyes burned with suspicion. Even if this human carries ancient blood, it does not give her the right to stand within the royal line. She is not vampire. Emily finally spoke. "I never asked for any right or title. I only want to protect my daughter." Adrian turned slightly toward the nobles once more. Whether she asked for it or not, the truth remains the same. The hidden branch of the royal bloodline has returned. The words fell into the hall like a stone dropped into deep water. The nobles exchanged tense glances as centuries of political order suddenly felt far less certain. Hallbrook's voice lowered dangerously. "Then the vampire court will have to decide what to do about it." The final words of Lord Victor Hallbrook hung in the throne hall like a blade waiting to fall. "Then the vampire court will have to decide what to do about it." For several long seconds no one moved. The nobles stood in a half-circle beneath the towering pillars, their ancient eyes shifting between the glowing mark on Emily Carter's wrist and the identical symbol burning faintly on the wrist of their king. The air inside the hall had changed. It was no longer the quiet tension of curiosity. It was the heavy stillness that came before conflict. Emily felt Lily's small hand tighten around her fingers again. "Mom, why are they looking at you like that?" Emily bent slightly and whispered softly, "Because they are afraid of something they do not understand, sweetheart." Across the marble floor, Lord Holbrook stepped forward again, his expression now colder than before. "Your Majesty, the matter is larger than a simple curiosity. If this human truly carries a royal bloodline, then every ancient law of the vampire court must be reconsidered." The Northern Lord voice carried through the hall with deliberate strength. "Our history records that when the royal bloodline fractures, it often leads to war among the houses." Marcus Thorne spoke calmly. "The history you refer to also records that destroying a royal bloodline has consequences far worse than political unrest. Ancient blood magic binds the throne itself." Holbrook did not look convinced. A human branch of the royal bloodline is a weakness the vampire world cannot afford. One of the nobles behind him added quietly, "If rival clans learn about this, they may claim the throne has been corrupted." Another voice spoke from the side of the hall. "Then perhaps the problem should be resolved before that happens." The implication behind those words was clear enough that even Lily sensed it. The little girl looked up at Adrian with wide eyes. "Mr. King Vale, they're talking about hurting my mom." Adrian Vale's expression did not change, but the air around him grew noticeably colder. He stepped forward slowly until he stood between Emily Carter and the nobles. His long coat brushed against the marble floor as he moved, and the crimson glow of the sovereign blood mark on his wrist flared brighter than before. "No one in this hall will speak about harming her again." The calm authority in his voice carried the weight of 6 centuries of rule. Lord Holbrook folded his arms but did not retreat. "Your Majesty, you protect a human woman whose bloodline could split the throne in two. That is a dangerous decision." Adrian's gaze locked onto the Northern Lord with quiet intensity. "The throne does not fear truth, Lord Holbrook, and the throne does not abandon its own blood." The words echoed through the chamber like a declaration carved into stone. Several nobles exchanged uneasy looks. The meaning behind the king's statement was unmistakable. By acknowledging the bloodline Adrian had already taken aside, Emily felt the gravity of that moment settle over her shoulders. "I never asked to be part of your world," she said softly, "but I will not allow my daughter to grow up hunted because of a mark I was born with." Lily lifted her chin slightly in quiet determination beside her mother. Marcus Thorne stepped closer to the king and spoke in a low voice that still carried across the hall. "Your Majesty, if the court believes the hidden royal branch has returned, then the ancient succession laws will come into question. Some nobles may demand proof that Emily Carter blood truly connects to the lost Queen Eleanor." Holbrook nodded slowly. "Exactly. If the human woman claims royal blood, then she must face the same test every royal heir has faced since the first vampire throne was created." Adrian turned toward him. "Speak clearly, Lord Holbrook." The Northern Lord voice carried a dangerous calm. "The blood recognition trial. A ritual older than the Citadel itself. If she survives at the court, will have no choice but to accept the truth of her bloodline." A ripple of tension moved through the hall at the mention of the ancient trial. Even Marcus Thorne's expression grew more serious. Emily had no idea what the ritual meant, but the way the vampires reacted made one thing painfully clear. Whatever the blood recognition trial was, it could change her fate forever. The words blood recognition trial spread through the throne hall like a cold wind, moving through ancient stone corridors. Even the oldest nobles shifted uneasily when the ritual name was spoken aloud. Emily Carter did not yet understand what the trial involved, but the reaction of every vampire present made one thing very clear. This was not a simple test. It was something far older and far more dangerous than she had imagined. Lily looked up at her mother's face and whispered softly, "Mom, what is a blood recognition trial?" Emily gently squeezed her daughter's hand. I do not know, sweetheart, but I think we are about to find out. Across the hall, Marcus Thorne stepped forward with a serious expression that rarely appeared on his normally composed face. Your Majesty, the ritual Lord Holbrook speaks of has not been performed for more than 300 years. It was used only when the royal bloodline was questioned by the court. Adrian Vale stood perfectly still for a moment. The crimson glow of the sovereign blood mark on his wrist flickered slowly as if responding to the tension spreading through the hall. Explain the trial for everyone present, Marcus. Marcus inclined his head slightly before turning toward the nobles and Emily Carter. The blood recognition trial is an ancient rite created by the first vampire kings. It is designed to prove whether a person truly carries royal blood. The ritual takes place within the chamber beneath the citadel where the original throne was forged. Inside that chamber rests the Heart Stone, an artifact created through ancient blood magic when a vampire monarchy was first established. Lord Holbrook folded his arms with quiet satisfaction. The Heart Stone reacts only to the blood of the royal line. If the human woman carries the blood of Queen Eleanor, then the artifact will recognize her presence. Emily felt a chill move down her spine. And if it does not recognize me? Holbrook's voice answered with calm certainty. Then the mark on your wrist will fade, and the court will know it was nothing more than a magical anomaly. Marcus Thorne spoke again with careful seriousness. There is another possibility as well. Emily looked toward him. What possibility? If the blood within you carries royal power but cannot withstand the ancient magic of the Heartstone, then the ritual could overwhelm your body. The chamber fell silent after those words. Even some of the nobles who had demanded the trial seemed uneasy now that its true danger had been spoken aloud. Lily stepped closer to her mother and wrapped both arms around Emily's waist. I do not like that test, Mom. Adrian finally spoke again. His voice carried a quiet strength that filled the hall. The blood recognition trial was created to reveal truth, not to destroy it. Marcus met the king's gaze carefully. That is true, Your Majesty. But the ritual was designed for vampires whose bodies can survive the strain of ancient blood magic. Emily Carter is human. The chamber beneath the citadel has not tested human blood in recorded history. Holbrook shrugged slightly. Then the risk will prove whether her claim deserves to be believed. Emily took a slow breath as she looked around the throne hall. A few hours ago, she had been a maid quietly cleaning corridors while her daughter slept in a small servant room. Now she stood in the center of a political storm that could reshape the vampire world. She looked down at Lily, who was watching her with worried eyes. Emily brushed her daughter's hair gently. It is all right, sweetheart. Whatever happens, I will face it. Adrian stepped closer and his voice lowered, so only those near him could hear. You do not have to accept the trial tonight. The court cannot force the ritual without your consent. Emily studied the glowing mark on her wrist. The ancient crimson lines pulsed quietly beneath her skin as if they were listening to every word spoken in the hall. Then she lifted her head and looked toward the gathered nobles. If the truth about my blood can protect my daughter from being hunted, then I will face your trial. The reaction across the hall was immediate. Some nobles looked surprised, while others watched her with renewed curiosity. Lord Holbrook gave a slow nod. Then the blood recognition trial will take place at sunrise in the chamber beneath Blackthorn Citadel. As the words settled into the hall, the ancient magic within Emily's wrist mark pulsed once more as if the hidden flame of her bloodline was preparing for the moment that would decide everything. The first light of morning crept slowly across the mountains surrounding Blackthorn Citadel as the ancient ritual chamber beneath the fortress came alive once more. The chamber had not been opened for centuries. Stone walls carved during the earliest days of the vampire monarchy rose around a circular floor etched with symbols of blood magic older than most civilizations. At the center of the chamber rested a single dark pedestal made from black granite. Embedded within that pedestal was the artifact every vampire in the world feared and respected. The Heart Stone. It was not large. The stone was no bigger than a human heart, glowing faintly with a deep crimson light that pulsed slowly like living blood trapped in crystal. The nobles of the vampire court stood around the circular chamber in silent anticipation. Lord Victor Holbrook watched carefully from the front of the gathering. Marcus Thorne stood beside the throne platform where Adrian Vale waited. Emily Carter entered the chamber slowly, with Lily holding her hand. The child looked around at the strange, glowing symbols carved into the stone floor, but remained bravely quiet. Adrian stepped closer to Emily. The decision you made last night cannot be undone once the ritual begins. Emily nodded calmly. I understand. If this proves the truth, then my daughter will never have to hide again. Marcus Thorne gestured toward the pedestal. The ritual is simple in form, but powerful in nature. You must place your hand upon the heartstone. If your blood carries the royal flame, the artifact will recognize it and awaken the mark fully. The entire vampire court will witness the truth. Emily looked down at Lily and smiled softly. Wait here with the king's sweetheart. Lily nodded, although worry filled her eyes. Adrian placed a gentle hand on the child's shoulder as Emily stepped forward toward the pedestal. The chamber fell into complete silence. Every ancient vampire present watched as Emily Carter slowly placed her hand upon the glowing stone. For one long breath, nothing happened. Then the chamber erupted with light. The heartstone flared with brilliant crimson energy that rushed outward through the carved symbols on the floor like a river of fire. The sovereign blood mark on Emily's wrist ignited with the same blazing light. The power moved through the chamber like a living heartbeat. Several nobles stepped backward in shock. Marcus Thorne's voice broke the stunned silence. The heartstone has recognized her blood. Lord Holbrook stared at the glowing mark with disbelief. That is impossible. Yet the ancient artifact continued to shine brighter with every passing second. Adrian Vale stepped forward slowly as the truth became undeniable. Emily Carter blood carried the same royal flame that had ruled the vampire world for centuries. The hidden branch of the royal bloodline had returned exactly as the ancient records described. Emily removed her hand from the heartstone, and the chamber light slowly faded back to its normal glow. She turned toward Lily, who ran forward and hugged her tightly. Mom, you did it. Adrian looked across the gathered nobles with calm authority. The blood recognition trial has spoken. Emily Carter carries the royal bloodline of Queen Eleanor. By the laws of the ancient throne, she is part of the sovereign house. The vampire court stood silent as the weight of the revelation settled over them. Lord Holbrook lowered his head slowly, no longer able to deny the truth revealed by the heartstone itself. Marcus Thorne spoke quietly beside the king. The throne has not divided, your majesty. It has grown stronger. Adrian Vale looked at Emily Carter and Lily standing together in the center of the chamber. For the first time in centuries, the ancient prophecy had come to life. The hidden flame had returned not as a rival to the throne, but as a reminder that the royal bloodline had never truly vanished. Adrian's voice carried calmly through the chamber. From this day forward, Emily Carter and her daughter will live under the protection of the throne. No vampire will raise a hand against them. The ancient court slowly bowed their heads in acceptance as a new chapter of the vampire world began beneath the rising light of morning.